surrounding his gruesome death. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. As Harris Faulkner just mentioned, Secretary Pompeo is at the podium at the State Department. Let's listen in.
Diplomatic efforts, our sustained implementation of UN sanctions, and the inter-Korean cooperation. And finally, I just left a meeting with Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu today. I welcome the positive momentum in our relationship following the release of Pastor Brunson and urged reopening additional channels to address issues of mutual concern. We are still greatly concerned about Turkey's continued unjust detention of U.S. locally employed staff and citizens, including NASA scientist Serkan Gölge. We also discussed the Khashoggi case and the need to work together to de-escalate conflict in Syria, support the reinvigoration of the UN-led peace process, and achieve a peaceful, lasting solution to the Syrian conflict. With that, I'm happy to take a few questions.
I'll call on questions. Secretary, one of the things that the president points to in his statement is a $110 billion arms initiative. But by the State Department's own record, in October, only $14.5 billion has come through. When do you expect to see the rest of the money from that arms agreement?
Some of these contracts, the defense contracts in particular, are complex, lengthy contract negotiations. We are working diligently on the remainder of those. We actually hope that number will end up being even greater. I couldn't tell you when those negotiations will conclude, but we are very hopeful that each of those commitments that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia made to the United States to purchase equipment will be completed in a timely fashion.
Michelle Delvera.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mr. Secretary, based on the President's statement, moving forward, the relations with Saudi Arabia won't be affected by the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and how can you differentiate between the kingdom and the crown prince?
Yeah. So it's a mean, nasty world out there. The Middle East in particular, there are important American interests to keep the American people safe, to protect Americans, not only Americans who are here, but Americans who are traveling and working, doing business in the Middle East. It is the President's obligation, indeed the State Department's duty as well, to ensure that we adopt policies that further America's national security. So as the President said today, the United States will continue to have a relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They're an important partner of ours. We will do that with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, its people. That is the commitment that the President made today. It's that straightforward. By the way, this is a long, historic commitment and one that is absolutely vital to America's national security. We are determined to ensure that we continue to make sure that we take care of the American people in all of the strategic decisions we make about with whom we work around the world.
Michelle with NPR.
So one quick follow-up on that and then a question on Iran. So does the America First agenda mean putting U.S. business interests ahead of human rights concerns? And then on Iran, have you considered any specific actions, specific sanctions to pressure Iran to release the American citizens who are held there?
Hey, try taking your second question first.
Yep.
We are engaged every day, literally every day, in working to return every U.S. citizen who is either wrongfully detained or a hostage somewhere around the world. That certainly includes Bob Levinson and all those that are being held by the Iranian regime. We're determined to get them back. As President Trump has made very clear, we're not going to pay a price for their return, but we're prepared to work with all those who can assist us in getting those Americans returned to their families and returned here to our country. Your other question is best answered by talking about what we have already done. There has been an enormous effort with respect to fact-finding pertaining to the death, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. A lot of U.S. resources have been devoted to determining the facts to the best of our ability to determine precisely what happened there. The United States took a very strong response. We have sanctioned 17 individuals in connection with that investigation. We are at the same time committed to making sure that we place America's national security interests and all the actions that take place in the context of doing the right thing to make sure that America continues to thrive and grow. And when we do that, the world is better off for it too. and the Middle East is better off as well.
Ben from NHK.
Yeah, you mentioned Steve Biegun's meeting with his South Korean counterpart. I just wanted to ask, what's the message he's going to be sending as far as what the U.S. government would like to see South Korean government do as far as coordinating their inter-Korean efforts and the denuclearization efforts?
So I think there's complete agreement between the South Koreans and us with respect to how this should proceed. We now have a working group that formalizes those processes so that we can be sure that we don't talk past each other, that we don't take an action or the South Koreans don't take an action that the other is unaware of or hasn't had a chance to comment on or provide their thoughts. And that's the purpose of the working group that's being led on our side by Stephen Biegun. We have made clear to the Republic of Korea that we do want to make sure that that peace on the peninsula and the denuclearization of North Korea aren't lagging behind the increase in the amount of interrelationship between the two Koreas. We view them as tandem, as moving forward together. We view them as important parallel processes, and that working group is designed to make sure they continue to remain that way.
And a final question, CNN.
Hi, Secretary Pompeo. You mentioned you're gathering all these facts. Does the president's statement today mean that that fact-finding segment is over? And have you seen the assessment he is expected to get today?
I can't comment on intelligence matters. I direct you to the DNI, Director Coates, or to the CIA to talk about particular intelligence issues. Facts will obviously still continue to come to light. I'm confident of that. It's the way the world works.
And as these facts come to light, will you pursue further actions against whoever, even if it does show culpability?
We have been unambiguous with respect to how we have treated the data set that we have been able to get. When America has the information it needs, it will, of course, do the right thing to protect American interests. And we have done so every time.
How can you trust the Saudis if there's so much disinformation?
As well, the question, the Prime Minister Saad Hariri said that they are as well as not the government.
All right, that was Secretary Mike Pompeo at the State Department doing a little press conference there with making some news, especially on Saudi Arabia and a little bit on North Korea as well. John Roberts is live at the White House. John, I wanted to bring you in here because this news dropped just about a few minutes ago. The president, as we understand it, and Mike Pompeo just confirmed, the president had not yet received the assessment from the intelligence community, but he put out the statement beforehand. Is that correct?
He certainly seemed to get out ahead of anything that comes out of the intelligence community. You know, he pardoned the Thanksgiving turkey a few minutes ago. It looks like at about the same time he was pardoning the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Here's what the president said in a statement that clearly came from his own hand. Quote, King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman vigorously deny any knowledge of the planning or execution of the murder of Mr. Khashoggi. Our intelligence agencies continue to assess all information, but it could be very well that the Crown Prince had not knowledge of this tragic event. Maybe he did, and maybe he didn't. The president adding, quote, we may never know all of the facts surrounding the murder of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi. But in the statement, the president said that he did not want to risk the relationship, the important strategic and economic relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. The president also pointed to the fact that 17 Saudis have already been targeted for U.S. sanctions, Saudis who are believed to be involved in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And the president also seemed to go some distance to impugning the the word I'm grasping for, basically imputing Jamal Khashoggi, also in the statement saying representatives of Saudi Arabia, his reputation, that's the word I'm looking for, representatives of Saudi Arabia say Jamal Khashoggi was an enemy of the state and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, but my decision is in no way based on that. This is an unacceptable and horrible crime. The president also recognized that Congress is probably going to want to look into all of this, but the president saying that he will look at the recommendations from Congress, quote, only if they are consistent with the absolute security and safety of America. And the president saying that Saudi Arabia continues to be, quote, a great ally. So it looks, Dana, even though the final assessment from the intelligence community is not in, that the president has already made his determination that bin Salman may or may not have been involved, but it likely isn't going to go any further than it has already.
It's one of those things where a president has to make a very tough call and then has to communicate it in a way that he thinks will work. He has several different audiences. A president, whenever he's speaking, you're talking to the Saudis, certainly, the broader Middle East. You're talking to your allies. You're talking to your military. You're talking to your cabinet. You're talking to the American people. You're talking to the businesses. What Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, kept coming back to in his press conference was that the United States president has an obligation to protect the United States, to protect the people of the United States that might be working overseas, and that they have to take that extremely seriously, even if you have a situation as complex as this one. But I think that what Mike Pompeo was trying to say is, yeah, it's a tough call. It's not always the one that you necessarily would have made if you didn't have all of these other considerations to have to consider.
Yeah, you know, and the question was actually very pointed and well framed. The question was, are you putting the interests of American corporations above the interests of human rights? And then the Secretary of State went on to say that, look, we've got to consider what the reality of the situation is here. The Middle East is a dangerous place, and the United States has to have a very strong ally in the region, and Saudi Arabia is one of those allies. And so you have to make the calculation as to what you're going to do based on the relationship that you need to have with such an important strategic ally. So it looks, Dana, for the moment at least, that this is going to be sanctions against the 17 Saudis who were named by the Treasury Department the other day, and likely isn't going to extend to the Saudi leadership.
John, do you know if those 17 that are targeted for sanctions, if it overlaps with the 12 that the Saudis have said that they might put on the executioner's block?
I believe it does, yes. I mean, I don't remember all of the names, a few of them, but I believe there is overlap there.
Let me also ask you this about the president seems to have a very good relationship with Gina Haspel, the CIA director. Remember, of course, Mike Pompeo sent immediately to Saudi Arabia. Gina Haspel sent directly to Turkey. And then coming back, she's going forward and putting out their assessment. And that's what the intelligence community can do. They can, here's our assessment, and the president can take it or leave it. It is an interesting decision. Not a bad one, maybe, from a strategic point of view, for the president to say, look, I'm going to have to make this decision regardless of what this report says because of the decisions that we have to make as commander-in-chief. It might not be the one that you and I would make, but, John, you and I don't have those responsibilities.
No, we don't. And, you know, this, again, is going to put the president in a position, if the CIA, as expected, comes out. You know, the New York Times had an article the other day saying that the CIA has concluded that Mohammed bin Salman ordered either the abduction of Jamal Khashoggi and or his murder. And so if the president does not accept the CIA's findings in terms of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, that puts him in the position again of disagreeing with his own intelligence community, as he did so many times over whether or not Russia was involved in trying to influence the outcome of the election.
All right, John Roberts, I know you just had the turkey pardoning, and then this happened all at once, so a fairly busy news day this Tuesday. Thank you, John. So how will the murder of Khashoggi impact our relations with Saudi Arabia? We'll talk to a Democratic congressman. Plus, a Democratic congressman faces a heated crowd after opposing Nancy Pelosi's bid to become House Speaker again.
So it's a mean, nasty world out there. The Middle East in particular, there are important American interests to keep the American people safe, to protect Americans, not only Americans who are here, but Americans who are traveling and working, doing business in the Middle East. It is the president's obligation, indeed the State Department's duty as well, to ensure that we adopt policies that further America's national security.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Joining me now is Congressman David Cicilline, who is running for assistant leader of the House Democratic Caucus. He's also a member of the Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committee. And, sir, it's good to have you here with us today. This news just broke at the top of the hour, and I wanted to get your initial thoughts on the president's decision, basically saying that at this point the sanctions are going to have to stand and no further action will be taken.
Well, I mean, it seems as if the president has made that statement before having the review that he has been expecting today. So I think this is very troubling. Look, Saudi Arabia is obviously an important strategic ally in the region, but this is a very, very serious event. This is the murder of a journalist who was lured into a consulate office and brutally killed. Our intelligence agencies are reporting that there is reason to believe that it came from the Crown Prince himself. It was executed at his direction or with his knowledge. And our foreign policy has to also reflect our values. And the United States has important moral leadership in the world. And I think it's very important that we have an independent investigation by the UN or some other appropriate body to find out exactly what happened, to hold the people accountable who did this, to impose real punishment on Saudi Arabia if, in fact, the Crown Prince was involved in this. Our moral leadership in this area really matters, and our long-term national security interests are really have to reflect our moral leadership in the world.
The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is at length trying to explain that there are security concerns, that the United States president has to make maybe a different calculation than others because he holds the responsibility to keep others safe, and not just Americans, but perhaps those working overseas and our allies. Does that, you're on the Foreign Relations Committee, does that wash with you?
Yeah, no, I think we have to be very insistent that as we promote American national security interests around the world, that we do it in a way that reflects our values and that, recognizes that we benefit from a world that is stable, where human rights are respected, where a free press is respected. So I think these two things are connected, and the United States needs to continue to assert its moral leadership and strongly condemn and get to the bottom of who's responsible for the really
I hear you. Right. In terms of human rights is in our interest for our national security. Thank you, Congressman David Cicilline. We'd love to have you back. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We will get Republican reaction to Mike Pompeo's response to the Khashoggi murder from Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He's up next. And the new threat for areas already devastated by the California wildfires. News alert: President Trump sticking behind Saudi Arabia following the killing of columnist Jamal Khashoggi, who was critical of the kingdom. The president releasing a statement saying, in part, after my heavily negotiated trip to Saudi Arabia last year, the kingdom agreed to spend and invest $450 billion in the United States. Our intelligence agencies continue to assess all information, but it could very well be that the Crown Prince had knowledge of this tragic event. Maybe he did, and maybe he didn't. They have worked closely with us and have been very responsive to my requests to keeping oil prices at reasonable levels, so important for the world. Congressman Adam Kinzinger is a Republican from Illinois who sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, a veteran as well. And I wondered if you could give your initial thoughts since this statement came out just about 20 minutes ago.
I don't like the statement. I like the results. I wish this statement would have been about a page and a half of how terrible this act is and how bad it is and how, as Americans, we believe in the freedom of press and human rights and human dignity. But I think the results were correct. The interesting thing in this whole debate, there are folks that want to strategically realign our relationship with Saudi Arabia right now, and they claim it's because of this incident. If you actually look at the people that are calling for this, their opposition to Saudi Arabia didn't start 2 months ago. Right. It started basically when they got in politics. So there's something else driving this. And then you look at Russia, you look at Iran, you look at what they're doing in Syria. 500,000 dead Syrians, 50,000 of them are kids. Russia seemingly every day kills journalists in Moscow. They killed 2 people in the United Kingdom, all at the direction of Vladimir Putin. So to come in and say that now, because this one journalist, as terrible as it is, was killed, we have to basically disown Saudi Arabia is not thinking strategically in foreign policy, to say the least. Right.
It is obviously a complex decision. The president of the United States has to have a different calculation than anybody else because the sole responsibility for the safety of the American people rests with him. I wanted to read to you a tweet from John Brennan, though, because, as you can imagine, he was quite critical. He said, since Mr. Trump excels in dishonesty, it is now up to members of Congress to obtain and declassify the CIA findings on Jamal Khashoggi's death. No one in Saudi Arabia, most especially the Crown Prince, should escape accountability for such a heinous act. How would that go down at the Foreign Relations Committee as Democrats take over the majority in January?
I mean, they'll probably try to do it, and they're going to try to do it because they want to use this to embarrass the president. The president said, I wish he didn't say he either knew or didn't know. I don't like that part of the statement, but the president at least is acknowledging that the crown prince likely knew about it, probably actually ordered it. I don't know what's going to change that by declassifying a CIA report. We've gotten too much. By the way, this is my party and the other party. Too much we're using intel, declassifications, things like that as a political tool and not what it's been there for, which is to protect national security interests of the United States. The president made the right decision here, and I'm afraid that there are going to be people, frankly, on the far right and definitely in the Democratic Party that are going to use this to just simply try to discredit and embarrass his foreign policy.
Take a listen also. I wanted to ask you about this because Mike Pompeo made some other news regarding Interpol.
You've seen that Interpol is electing a new president. It's an important organization. We strongly endorse Kim Jong-yang, who is serving as its acting president. We encourage all nations and organizations that are part of Interpol and that respect the rule of law to choose a leader with credibility and integrity that reflects one of the world's most critical law enforcement bodies. We believe Mr. Kim will be just that.
So what Secretary Pompeo didn't say there, Congressman, is that the U.S. is opposing the Russian nominee to lead the Interpol, citing Russian abuses. Again, right decision?
Absolutely. I mean, Mike Pompeo, obviously a friend of mine, great guy. This is a no-brainer. Russia is basically like the fox guarding the hen house. They should not have a Russian in charge of Interpol. They're among the biggest international law violators. As we mentioned earlier, they murder people all the time. Putting Russia in charge of Interpol will not just be stupid, it will actually take away the whole credibility of the organization and should be stopped. Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thanks for being here today. Happy Thanksgiving to you. And we'll be right back. See you. You too. We'll be right back. And on migrants who cross the southern border illegally, the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security insisting the president was well within his authority to institute new asylum rules, as Homeland Security now says more than 500 criminals are in the caravan. Now, former senior advisor to Democratic Senator Patty Murray and Lanhee Chen, he's former policy director for the Mitt Romney campaign. Let me first go to you, Lanhee, because it's one thing when you want to make a policy change, but then there's the statute. And as I understand it, the statute basically specifically says whether or not entering via a port of entry. And so you can't just carve up a statute and expect for the court to go along with it.
Yeah, this is part of the challenge, Dana, is that the statute does illustrate or does specifically say what the conditions are. Now, it is the case that the vast majority of the people who seek asylum generally don't qualify under the technical definition of what asylum provides for, which is a credible fear of persecution due to any number of protected classifications. So in this situation, I think what the administration is trying to do is to create some workable process to get people into a formal request for asylum. But look, the number of people coming in, the number of people that are trying to do it at this point is really quite overwhelming. I think that's the factor the administration's trying to deal with.
Dave, the administration, the federal government is saying, look, the president of the United States has this authority and that they anticipate that this will probably be like the Muslim ban overturned later on. Do you see that happening?
So a couple of things. One, part of what the judge has to look at is the likelihood of parties to prevail on the merits, and in this case, he concluded that they would. And, you know, Lonnie's right in how he framed this. I mean, the INA, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, addresses this question on the nose. And the terms of the statute pretty clear, saying that an alien, wherever he or she enters in the U.S., whether it's at a port of call or illegally crosses, under that statute can apply for asylum. And so what you have here is a classic conflict between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And at least according to this judge, as I read his order, really it's up to Congress and the administration to find a political solution and path forward. And probably that means a new law.
Lanhee, let me just then ask you, from a policy perspective, then the law probably then needs to change. And we're heading into a new Congress with a split government. That doesn't mean something can't happen. Often good things can happen when you have divided government. What would your approach be here to get this done?
Well, I'm skeptical that there will be an opportunity, even on an issue this pressing, to get anything done. But really, the only thing you need to do is to turn on this network and take a look and see exactly what's happening at the border to realize this is a pressing problem that if Congress does not address, there will continue to be a lack of clarity on. And frankly, all of this ambiguity is a problem for our immigration policy.
And it's not good for the people that are there waiting and putting all the pressure there in Tijuana, suffering on their way up. Sorry I had to cut you a little bit short there. Dave Brown and Lanhee Chen, we've had so much news today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
79 people are dead and about 700 still unaccounted for in the horrific wildfires in Northern California. Rescue crews sifting through rubble, searching for more victims, and now there are new threats of flash flooding and mudslides as heavy rain moves in. Claudia Cowan, she's live in Chico, California. Claudia?
And Dana, a good winter storm is generally great news for California, but not here, not now. The forecast of several inches of rain falling here over the next few days has search crews racing against time because that will almost certainly turn the ground and ash into mud, hampering the ongoing search for human remains. Officials also worry the rain could trigger mudslides and a flash flood watch is in effect. Some residents in Paradise are being allowed to visit their burned out homes, but in most cases, there's nothing to salvage.
Look at this. I mean, these used to be two really nice little houses, well built by me, and that's what, the only thing sticking up is the melted refrigerator. I don't have enough time left on the planet to ever have it again, and that's pretty hard to take.
There are stories of hope worth highlighting, like Jonathan Clark, who'd been searching all the shelters looking for his brother Maurice and his little boy, finally finding them and FaceTiming their mother together.
Hi, what's up?
So, I'm just giving you some good news here.
What? You found Maurice?
I found that lunatic.
I'm so glad you're okay.
And in many ways, scenes at shelters like this one are heartwarming, too. Donations are pouring in to help the 200 or so fire evacuees who are staying here. All over town, there are signs thanking first responders and vowing to rebuild. In the midst of so much sadness and loss, Dana, hashtag Paradise Strong is trending.
Well, as it should. All right, Claudia Cowan, thank you. Nancy Pelosi facing opposition in her party as 16 House Democrats sign a letter calling for new leadership. Will it derail her bid to become Speaker once again?
Leave the White House and head to Florida for the Thanksgiving holidays in just a minute. We'll see if he stops on the lawn to talk to reporters, as he often does, for questions on everything from the investigation into the murder of Jamal Khashoggi to the report that his daughter Ivanka used personal email for government business. Top of the hour, Shepard Smith reporting.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi facing opposition in her bid to become Speaker of the House again, with a group of Democrats signing a letter calling for new leadership. Congresswoman Kathleen Rice also writing an op-ed today saying, as Democrats look back at how we won our new House majority, let's not forget what got us here, a promise of change, a focus on the future, inspiring those who have grown sick of the status quo and are desperate for new leadership. Joining me now is Shelby Holliday. She's Wall Street Journal senior video reporter. Here with us on this Thanksgiving week. You've been following this story. Nancy Pelosi, she's not going down without a fight.
It's absolutely true. It's not a done deal. She hasn't locked up the bid. She's out there projecting herself as though she will be Speaker. She's very confident, and she's giving press conferences talking about how she's sure she will be Speaker. But behind the scenes, she's making a lot of phone calls. Her allies are trying to get some of her detractors on board. And when it comes to House Speaker, it's all about the math. There are 435 representatives. You need a majority of the total votes cast. So what she could do is take some of these 16 to 20 Democrats who oppose her and ask them simply to sit on the sidelines. You can vote pass. Your vote won't count toward the total. So we did a Wall Street Journal video explaining
you could say
the math.
back home, I didn't vote for her.
You didn't support her, but you don't necessarily count against her.
Marcia Fudge said this on Monday about Pelosi. She said she's going to decide after Thanksgiving whether to oppose her. She said, we talked about some succession plan. I'd like to know what her plans are for retirement. She did not share them with me, but I think that is something that our caucus is interested in finding out. I think this is very interesting because in some ways, Speaker Pelosi, former Speaker Pelosi, wants to be Speaker again. She could be basically the caretaker speaker until they figure out who is going to be the next leader.
And a lot of Democrats want to see that because right now there's no clear alternative, even though Marcia Fudge has said she might throw her name in the hat. A lot of people who could support her have already pledged their support for Pelosi. Pelosi has a few bargaining chips. Retirement is one of them, or sort of a term limit on her speakership is one of them. She could also promise Democrats roles on certain committees or roles in writing legislation, and so she could get people behind her. She has a lot of bargaining power.
You brought the letter with you of the 16 Democrats who signed this letter, but aren't most of them in very safe seats, so they don't have to really worry about this becoming an issue for them?
Many are safe, and then there's also the criticism that many of them are men, and they don't reflect the diversity of this new incoming Democratic class. And so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez last night said, hey, opposing Pelosi isn't enough. There's no vision behind this. It doesn't represent all of the women who were elected, the diverse class coming in. And so there's like a hashtag 5 white men that people are knocking, saying the people who oppose Pelosi don't necessarily represent the Democrats.
And then I guess my last question to you would be, does Nancy Pelosi deserve some credit for basically taking all the slings and arrows over the course of this election season, the Republicans making her public enemy #1, and they won up to 40 seats in the House. I mean, she showed that she is still able to lead.
That's a great point. She's a huge fundraiser, and even though Kathleen Rice is out there saying we won on this promise of change, Nancy Pelosi also helped them win and is widely credited for helping all of these Democrats, the slow-moving blue wave, if you will, come into power. So yes, a lot of Democrats feel she does deserve to be Speaker, although they might want to see her term.
So they said I have time for one more, and I'm not going to ask about Nancy Pelosi because we share roots. We're Colorado girls, so you're going home for Thanksgiving?
Home to Denver,
What's your plan?
Can't wait to see my family. I think we're just going to eat and maybe play. I mean, Denver, if it's 50 degrees and sunny, you can go outside.
You're going outside.
Maybe play
I don't think we'll be
tennis
outside here in New York, but we're going to hear from Adam Kloss.
But New York's great. I'm jealous.
Okay, well, as soon as you get back, we'll have you back on the show. Thank you, Shelby Holliday.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Fox News Alert checking in on Wall Street. Stocks dropping sharply again today, and the Dow is down about 548 points now, dragged down by the tech sector. If you're a shareholder in any of those companies, how worried should you be about your portfolio or 401k? Here with me now, Christina Parson-Nevelis from the Fox Business Network. She always explains it so well. Christina.
Thank you, Dana. Sorry, my earpiece is not working right now. But what we're seeing across the board is in negative territory. You're seeing the Dow down over 500 points. At one point today, it actually dropped down to 600 points. And the reason, like you mentioned, is technology being a major factor. You've had these reports from suppliers for Apple iPhones pretty much alluding to the decrease in shipments. They haven't necessarily said that it's going to be Apple that is the cause of this, but there's all kinds of talk amongst analysts and traders saying that the demand for iPhones has decreased. And so that's caused the Apple stocks to drop and has pretty much weighted down the entire tech sector. If we turn to oil is also falling, and it's on track for its biggest loss in 3 years. You're seeing it on your screen right now. $53.30. It's actually climbed a little bit higher since we went live with this board, but this is weighing on the energy sector as a whole, so that's also contributing to the market rut that we're in at the moment. But if you're wondering, what's happening over the last little while, you have earnings that are coming out, constantly coming out, retail being one of them, Target coming out today, Kohl's, and they had earnings beat. But the problem is a lot of traders believe that maybe we've hit that peak. So peak earnings, there's concerns of slowing growth that we saw with the possible saturation of higher iPhones. Then the talk about the Fed increasing interest rates and the strong U.S. dollar, so that can make loans much more expensive. And then the constant concern for trade, is this going to be rectified? And that's increasing tariffs. And then last but not least, the textiles. So those are some of the reasons why you're seeing the sell-off today.
And this is important for parents. A consumer advocacy group is out with a recommendation for toys and notes that some are dangerous. What would those be?
Yeah, they come out with this every single year, and they're saying that overall, this is a nonprofit group, and they're saying there's been 40 recalls of toys, and it's hard to keep track when you're recalling 2.7 million units in a year. But I highlighted 5 of what I thought were the most common ones that parents should be keep an eye out. So this is slime. Some slime products have high quantities of toxic boron. Then you have these hatching toys. They're also called hatchy mammals. And I've never actually used one, but they break off into tiny pieces, and children can pick up those pieces and swallow them. Balloons always tops the list because it's the #1 choking hazard amongst children. Smart toys, which can be hacked. And then makeup. I brought this up because last year there was a problem with makeup coming from Claire's because of high levels of asbestos. So that's just one of the just 5 on that list. So I encourage people to go check it out.
Yeah, especially as they get their holiday shopping underway. Christina, thank you.
Thank you.
So high winds expected in New York City on Thursday could ground some balloons in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The forecast straight ahead. And the happy reunion when an Army captain stationed in Afghanistan surprises his son, a Clemson football player, during a game.